We build cages out of our own potential. We call them disciplines, routines, or standards, but often they are simply fear wearing a suit of armor. You convince yourself that every victory over a moment of weakness makes you invincible. You tell yourself that the refusal to rest is a sign of superior character. But deep down, in the quiet moments between the heartbeat and the breath, you feel the weight of it. You feel that this strength, if not balanced, turns into chains. It stifles the freedom to live, leaving you only with the capacity to survive. You become a statue, impressive, hard, unyielding, and entirely unable to move. John knew the precise texture of 4 in the morning. It was not a time of day for him. It was a territory he conquered daily. The alarm did not have to ring. His eyes opened at 3:59, a minute before the digital chime, driven by a cortisol spike that he mistook for ambition. The room was always cold. He kept it that way intentionally. Comfort was a sedative, and he was in the business of remaining awake. He swung his legs out of bed, his feet finding the hardwood floor. He did not flinch. To flinch would be to acknowledge the sensation, and to acknowledge the sensation was to give it power. John was 32 years old, but his internal landscape was ancient and scarred. A battlefield where war was waged every single day against the concept of softness. He moved through his apartment like a ghost haunting his own life. The space was minimalist, bordering on sterile. There were no stray papers, no unwashed cups, no soft cushions on the couch. Every object had a function, and if it did not contribute to his optimization, it was discarded. He drank a glass of room-temperature water with a squeeze of lemon not because he enjoyed the taste, but because the pH balance was optimal for metabolic ignition. By 4:15, he was on the pavement. The city of Winnipeg was a different creature in the dark. It was silent, heavy, and indifferent. John ran. He did not jog. Jogging was leisure. He ran with a metronomic precision, monitoring his heart rate on his watch, ensuring he stayed exactly within the anaerobic threshold. His breath plumed in the chill air. Rhythmic steam engine exhausts. He visualized his mind as a blade. This was an image he had stolen from the text of Miyamoto Musashi, the samurai philosopher. John had memorized the Book of 5 Rings, but he had read it with the eyes of an engineer, not a warrior. He saw the strategy, the discipline, the ruthlessness. He missed the fluidity. He missed the water. Do nothing which is of no use, Musashi had written. John repeated this mantra as his shoes struck the concrete. Use.utility. Function. If he was not improving, he was decaying. There was no middle ground. He pushed the pace, his lungs burning. The pain was good. The pain meant he was winning. Winning against whom? He never asked that question. He simply knew that there was an enemy, and that enemy was the version of himself that wanted to stop. By the time the sun began to bleed a bruise-colored light over the horizon, John had completed 12 kilometers, performed 40 minutes of Aikido drills in the empty park, and sat in 20 minutes of meditation that felt less like mindfulness and more like a tactical briefing with his own ego. He arrived at the engineering firm at 7:30, 30 minutes before the doors officially opened. His workspace was a mirror of his mind, dual monitors aligned perfectly, a notebook with a grid system for tasks, and a silence that pushed people away. John was a structural engineer. It was a fitting profession. He calculated loads. He determined how much weight a beam could bear before it snapped. He understood stress vectors. He understood that if a material was too rigid, it would shatter under vibration. Yet he applied none of this physics to his own psychology. John, did you see the email from the client regarding the cantilever adjustments? He looked up. It was Sarah, a junior engineer. She was holding a coffee cup with a cartoon cat on it. She looked tired. There were dark circles under her eyes, but they were the circles of someone who had stayed up late laughing or worrying about messy, human things. I addressed it last night, John said, his voice level, stripped of inflection. The revised blueprints are on the server. I improved the load distribution efficiency by 4%. Sarah blinked. Oh, wow, that single quotes s fast. I was going to look at it this morning. Thanks, John. You're a machine. A machine. She meant it as a compliment. John took it as a confirmation. A machine does not complain. A machine does not have off days. A machine is reliable until it is obsolete. It was necessary, he replied, turning back to his screen. He did not ask her how her evening was. He did not engage in the small rituals of social friction that bonded the rest of the team. He heard them in the break room, laughing about a TV show, complaining about their spouses, sharing photos of dogs. He felt a distinct, cold seed of irritation in his gut when he heard that laughter. It wasn't just annoyance, it was judgment. Why were they so content with mediocrity? Why did they celebrate their lack of discipline? They ate sugar that clouded their focus. They skipped workouts because it was raining. They allowed their emotions to dictate their productivity. He looked at his hand resting on the mouse. It was steady. He was superior. He told himself this repeatedly. He was the steel beam that held the building up. They were just the drywall decorative, fragile, easily replaced. But the steel beam carries all the weight. The cracks began to show not in his work, but in the silence of his apartment. It started with the insomnia. Despite the physical exhaustion he induced every day, the 12 kilometers, the weights, the aikido, his mind refused to shut down. He would lie in bed at 10 p.m., his blackout curtains drawn, and vibrate. It was a subtle vibration, a hum deep in the nervous system. It was the engine revving in neutral. He would stare at the ceiling, and the silence would begin to scream. He worried about the project timeline, even though he was weeks ahead. He worried about a slight twinge in his left knee. Was it a tear? Was it weakness? If he couldn't run, who was he? He began to audit his days with a forensic intensity. Had he wasted 3 minutes waiting for the elevator? Had he broken focus during meditation? The standards he set for himself were rising like floodwaters. What was enough yesterday was failure today. One Tuesday, it rained. It was not a light drizzle. It was a torrential downpour that turned the streets of Winnipeg into rivers. The wind was howling at 60 kilometers an hour. It was 4 a.m. John stood by the window, dressed in his running gear. Logic pure, engineering logic dictated that running in this weather was dangerous. The risk of slipping and tearing a ligament was high. The risk of illness was statistically significant. But the voice in his head, the tyrant he had cultivated, sneered. If you stay inside, you are soft. The weather is an excuse. The enemy is rain, and you are hiding. His heart rate spiked. He felt a physical wave of anxiety, hot and prickly, wash over his chest. If he missed this run, the chain was broken. If the chain was broken, the chaos would get in. He imagined his discipline as a dam holding back a black ocean of laziness and failure. One crack, and he would drown. He went out. He ran in the freezing rain, his shoes squelching, his vision blurred by water. He slipped twice, catching himself jarringly, sending shock waves up his spine. He ran with anger. He pounded the pavement as if he were trying to hurt the earth. When he finished, he was shivering violently, his lips blue, his skin raw. He looked at his watch. His time was 2 minutes slower than his average. He screamed, a short, guttural sound that was swallowed by the wind. He felt a profound sense of self-loathing. He had conquered the comfort of the bed. He had conquered the weather, but the numbers told him he had failed. He went to work with a fever. He worked through it, refusing to acknowledge the chills. He made a minor error in a calculation. A decimal point shifted. Sarah caught it. "John, I think this low calculation is off," she said gently, standing at his desk. He froze. He looked at the screen. She was right. It was a simple, stupid mistake, the kind a tired person makes. "I will fix it," he snapped, his voice louder than he intended. Sarah recoiled slightly. "It's fine. Everyone misses things. You look really pale. Are you okay?" "I am fine," he said, typing furiously, erasing the evidence of his fallibility. "I am perfectly fine." But he wasn't. He was a structure vibrating at its resonant frequency, the point where the shaking becomes self-sustaining and destructive. The nights became a torture chamber. He would wake up gasping, his chest tight. He started to fear the bed. He started to fear the quiet. He realized, with a creeping horror, that he didn't enjoy any of this. He didn't enjoy the running. He didn't enjoy the engineering. He didn't enjoy the philosophy. He was doing it all to keep a nameless terror at bay. He was running to stay ahead of a shadow that looked suspiciously like himself. It was mid-October when the leaves in Assiniboine Park had turned to fire-burnt orange, deep crimson, decaying gold. The air was crisp, smelling of wood smoke and damp earth. John was on his morning route. He was tired, deeply, marrow-level tired. The fever from weeks ago had lingered as a persistent fatigue, a fog that wrapped around his brain. He was forcing the run today. Every step was a negotiation. He came round a bend in the path near the duck pond. Usually, at this hour, the park was his domain. But today, there was someone else. An old man was standing by the water. He was wearing a heavy wool coat and a flat cap. He wasn't running. He wasn't exercising. He was simply standing, watching the ripples on the water where a duck had just landed. John felt the urge to speed up, to blur past this static figure, to prove his velocity against the man's stillness. But as he approached, a strange thing happened. His shoelace, which he double-knotted with military precision every morning, came undone. He tripped, stumbling forward, catching himself on a park bench just feet away from the old man. John cursed under his breath, his face flushing with the humiliation of clumsiness. He bent down to ready the shoe, his fingers fumbling with the wet laces. He was angry at the shoe, angry at the duck, angry at the old man for witnessing this glitch. The knot was too tight, a voice said. John looked up. The old man wasn't looking at him. He was still looking at the water. "Excuse me?" John said, defensive. "The knot," the man said, turning slowly. His face was a map of deep lines, his eyes clear and dark. "You tie it so tight that the tension works against itself. It snaps or it slips. There is no give." John finished the knot and stood up, straightening his moisture-wicking shirt. "I tie it so it doesn't come undone." It was a fluke. The old man smiled, but it wasn't a mocking smile. It was the smile of someone who has seen this play performed 1,000 times. "You run like you are being chased, son." "I am training," John corrected him. "I am pursuing excellence." "Is that what you call it?" The man gestured to the pond. "Look at the water. It is heavy, yes? It is strong. It carved the canyon. But it does not struggle. It flows. It wraps around the rock. It does not try to smash the rock, because that would destroy the water." "I'm not water," John said, shifting his weight. He wanted to leave. "I am building discipline," Musashi said. "Ah, Musashi," the old man interrupted softly, a glint of amusement in his eyes. "Everyone loves the swords, but they forget the brush." Musashi won because he understood that strength lies in harmony, not in fighting yourself. He wrote that you must become the void. "The void is emptiness," John said, reciting the definition he held in his head. "It is the removal of emotion, the removal of weakness." "No," the old man shook his head. "The void is not empty. It is spacious. It is the room for things to happen. If your cup is full of your own effort, your own noise, your own rules, there is no room for the world to help you. You are fighting the wind. You are fighting the ground. You are fighting your own body. That is not strength. That is just very loud suicide." John stared at him. The words felt like a physical blow. Loud suicide. "Find the emptiness where you are not an enemy, but an ally," the old man said, turning back to the ducks. "Try walking for a bit. The world will not fall apart if you do not hold it up for 10 minutes. John opened his mouth to retort, to explain the necessity of anaerobic thresholds. But the words died in his throat. He looked at the old man's back, then down at his own hands. They were clenched into fists. They were always clenched into fists. He turned to run. He took 3 steps. Then, he stopped. The silence of the park was immense. The wind rustled the dead leaves. A bird called out, a sharp, piercing sound. John felt a terrible pressure in his chest, the pressure of the schedule, the routine, the demand. But underneath it, he felt the exhaustion, the real, undeniable exhaustion of a man who has been holding his breath for 10 years. He did not run. He walked. It was a terrifying sensation. Walking felt like failure. It felt like surrender. His brain screamed at him. "You are losing gains. You are becoming weak. Sarah will see you are a fraud. The city will see." But he kept walking. He watched his breath cloud in the air, slower now. He looked at the trees, really looked at them, observing the chaotic, fractal pattern of the branches. They were not straight. They were twisted, bent by the wind, asymmetrical. And yet, they stood. They survived the winter not by being made of steel, but by bending. He walked for an hour. He arrived at work late. It was 8:15. He walked into the office. The lights were on. Sarah was at her desk. "You're late," she said, looking up, surprised. "Yes," John said. He waited for the building to collapse. He waited for the fire alarm. "Coffee?" she asked. John looked at the pot. He usually didn't drink the office coffee. It was acidic and impure. "Yes," he said. "Thank you." The coffee was bitter. It was hot. It tasted like humanity. The transformation was not a lightning strike. It was a slow thaw, like the coming of spring in the prairies. It was messy. It was uncomfortable. For the first few weeks, John suffered. When he skipped a workout or reduced the intensity, his anxiety spiked. He felt phantom limbs of energy that needed to be burned. He felt guilty, as if he were sinning against his potential. He went back to the park, hoping to find the old man, to ask for an instruction manual on how to be water. But the man was never there. John realized, with a dry irony, that he had to figure it out without a blueprint. He started small. He stopped bringing his watch on runs. He ran by feel. Some days he ran fast, because his body wanted to fly. Some days he ran slow, because his legs were heavy. He learned to listen to the feedback loop of his own biology rather than overriding it. He began to audit his apartment. He bought a rug. It was a deep, chaotic red. It served no structural purpose. It just felt soft under his feet. He left a book on the coffee table, unaligned with the edges. He stared at it, fighting the urge to straighten it, breathing through the itch until it faded. At work, the change was subtle. He stopped trying to optimize every conversation. He listened to Sarah talk about her cat. He found that when he wasn't constantly policing his own efficiency, he had more mental bandwidth to actually understand the problems they were solving. His solutions became less rigid, more creative. He started designing structures that worked with the environmental stresses rather than just resisting them. One evening, 6 months later, he was sitting in his apartment. It was raining again. The old John would be pacing, angry at the sky, planning a punishment workout for the morning to compensate for the inactivity. The new John sat on the couch. He was reading a novel fiction, something he used to consider a waste of cognitive resources. He had a blanket over his legs. He felt a thought arise. "You are being lazy." He looked at the thought. He didn't fight it. He didn't agree with it. He just let it float by, like a leaf on the surface of the river. "I am resting," he corrected gently. "I am repairing." He realized that the void the old man spoke of wasn't about having nothing. It was about having space. Space between the stimulus and the response. Space to choose. He closed his eyes. For the first time in years, the hum in his nervous system was gone. The engine was off. The silence was not screaming. It was singing. He understood now. Power is not the ability to tighten your fist until your knuckles turn white. That is just tension. Power is the ability to open your hand and let the world sit in your palm without crushing it. The invincible man is brittle. He breaks because he cannot bend. The balanced man is fluid. He can endure the storm because he does not try to stop the wind. He becomes part of the dance. John smiled. It was a small, private expression. He turned off the lamp. He went to bed without setting an alarm, trusting that he would rise when the sun did, ready not to conquer the day, but to inhabit it. We live in a world that sells us the idea of the machine. We are told to grind, to hustle, to optimize every second, to treat our need for rest as a defect in our operating system. We are terrified that if we stop swimming, we will sink. But look at the natural world. Nothing blooms all year. The tree does not apologize for the winter. The bear does not apologize for hibernation. The ocean has a high tide and a low tide, and the low tide is not a failure of the ocean. It is the inhale before the exhale. If you are holding yourself together so tightly that your muscles ache, if you are treating your own life as a problem to be solved rather than an experience to be had, ask yourself, who are you fighting? The sword that is always drawn eventually rusts. The bow that is always strung eventually snaps. True strength is not about how much weight you can carry. It is about knowing when to put it down. It is knowing that you are not the dam holding back the water. You are the water, and the water is free.